Hey, what's up, boys and girls? Joker here. Today we are going to be testing the Nvidia GTX 970 up against the AMD R9 390. I've been wanting to do this video for a couple of months now, but I've been waiting for all of the big AAA titles to finish releasing so that we could just do one big mega video and kind of go ahead and test all of the games of 2016 over two of the biggest selling cards of 2015 in the 970 and the R9 390. Of course, for our testing, we are using the latest drivers for both teams. So for Nvidia, that's 376.33, and on AMD, it's 16.12.2. That's their latest Crimson Relive drivers. But I actually did not install Relive, and I also did not install the Nvidia GeForce Experience because I didn't want any of that funky Nvidia telemetry getting in the way and coloring our numbers in any way, which, you know, a lot of people have theorized about that. I might do some testing in the future and kind of look into that, investigate it further, but I just, for this purpose, is like, we don't need to be recording the screen anyway, so we're just not installing Relive or GeForce Experience because that just might get in the way. As far as the exact cards that we are using, I have the EVGA 970 SSC, which is super clocked, but we did adjust the clock speeds on both of these cards. And for AMD, it's the Sapphire R9 390 Nitro. So both of these cards are overclocked coming out of the box. The 970 SSC obviously overclocked a lot further. Typically, the 970, a reference model would be 1050 megahertz, and that's what I downclocked it to by reducing the core by 140 megahertz because this card comes at 1190 and boosts to well over 1400, about 1430 megahertz. Usually you could see this card hitting if you didn't reduce the clock speed. When I reduced the clock by 140 megahertz, bringing it down to being basically a reference model 970, it kicked up to about 1290 megahertz on the boost with the 970 SSC card with my adjustment. On the Sapphire Nitro card, I only had to reduce that by 10 megahertz because it comes out at 1010 and the reference model is only 1000 megahertz. And, you know, as you guys know, the 390 does not overclock or, boost quite like the GTX 970 would, and you're going to see a lot more overclocking potential with the likes of the GTX 970, but we're not testing overclocking here. We're just testing these cards head to head. So I felt that it was important to make that as a vanilla comparison as possible. So to take a card like a 970 with like a 15% overclock out of the box versus a card with a 1% overclock out of the box really didn't seem too fair. So we had to go ahead and even that up. So we're effectively testing at what are the reference stock numbers for both of these GPUs if you were to buy them without any additional overclocking thrown onto them. So just know that ahead of time. And we were testing in my main system here along with the i7 6800K and 32 gigabytes of DDR4 memory. All the games are running off of an SSD, so that should help to eliminate any potential hardware bottlenecks that could come along the way. So really, we are just seeing a straight GPU shootout here in some of the biggest AAA titles of 2016. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at the numbers here. We're going to start off at 1080p, and then we'll switch gears over to 1440p. So looking at the 1080p numbers here, you can see I tested all of these games up at the Ultra preset, and when FXA or SMAA was available to us to use, I did utilize FXA or SMAA for the anti-aliasing solution, but I didn't do anything like Super Sample or SSAA or MSAA, anything like that. I didn't go any further than SMAA as far as the anti-aliasing was concerned, but otherwise, Ultra presets on all of these titles here, starting off with Overwatch, and we ran through a whole bunch of games here, and I did test in DX11 in the games where we did have options for DX11 and DX12, but you can see the R9 390 actually took pretty much a clean sweep across the board against the GTX 970, and likes of Overwatch beating it by 4 FPS with 93 to 89. Rise of the Tomb Raider was actually the only title where the GTX 970 pulled in a victory with 71 versus the 64 FPS. In Gears of War 4, our only real DX12 title here in the bunch, you could see the 390 pulling well ahead with 98 FPS versus the 72. So DX12, low overhead API, we can really see that taking advantage of the AMD hardware. Far Cry Primal and Division. Division was a tie at 54, but Far Cry Primal, we can see the 390 pulling ahead by 61 to 55. Watch Dogs 2 did not run great on either of these cards, even at 1080p, but still a victory for the R9 390 with 41 versus 38 FPS. Mirror's Edge Catalyst, we saw 85 to the 77 FPS of the GTX 970, and BF1, actually the 390 winning out in that as well. I tested on the Amiens map of 64-player Conquest, where we saw the 390 pulling in 85 FPS versus the 970's 77 FPS. I also even tested Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, where the 970 struggled to maintain 60 frames average, while the R9 390 pulled in a very respectable 72 FPS. And Doom, on the Vulkan API, we can see probably one of the most optimized titles of 2016, and we can see the 390 stomping a complete mud hole into the GTX 970 with 128 to 106 FPS. Mafia 3 was very close, 59 to 58, but that's also a fairly unoptimized title. They did do some patching to kind of improve on the performance in that game, but still not able to maintain an average 60 FPS in either of these previous generation cards. And Titanfall 2, here we can see 82 to 71, and Hitman a 76 to 54. So like I said, a clean sweep across the board for 1080p with the R9 390 versus the GTX 970. We're going to bump it up now over to 1440p, where that story continues, where the GTX 970 really only took a victory in Rise of the Tomb Raider with 47 versus the 45 FPS of the R9 390. Otherwise, all of the other games we tested here at 1440p, it was a victory in, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, the 970 did pull ahead by 1 frame, but otherwise it was a victory for the R9 390. But the other thing to note, though, is that for the vast majority of these titles, with the exceptions being Overwatch and Doom using the Vulkan API, none of the other major titles here that we saw testing at the Ultra preset were able to maintain an average of 60 FPS. But some of these titles did get very close, like Gears of War 4, Battlefield 1 certainly, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare on the AMD side at least, Titanfall 2 and Hitman. These games were getting very close to 60 frames, so if you have these cards, chances are if you're playing them, you can go ahead and tweak some settings, maybe drop it down to the high preset or lower down just maybe one or two of the more taxing options in some of these titles, and you should be able to get an average of 60 frames per second. But certainly a very favorable showing for the AMD R9 390 here. I would love to get your feedback on this down in the comments below between these two graphics cards. Most of you out there, maybe if you're watching this, you may already own one of these graphics cards. If you are, still looking to pick up a card, if for some reason you're not trying to get one of the newer cards, you can get a better deal on one of these on eBay. It's kind of hard to really find them at a good deal right now. I was looking around. I was able to find the 970s for around $170 to $180 used, while the R9 390s were up around $180 to $200 used. So the 390s were costing about $20 to $30 more than the GTX 970. But like I said, they were beating it across the board in these titles in 1080p and 1440 with just a couple of minor exceptions like Rise of the Tomb Raider. So yeah, I mean, if you can get a really good buy on one of these cards, then it might be worth picking up. But you can still find GTX 1060s and RX 480s out there for not much more than what you would be finding these cards used for. And if you do find these cards new, from what I've seen on Amazon, usually you're paying a pretty big premium since they're not really producing these cards anymore. So you're better off either buying one used or just getting yourself a 1060 or an RX 480, which is going to be another matchup which I am planning to do before year's end. So make sure that you are subscribe to see that video. If you enjoyed this, please stick a like on it down below. I would really appreciate that, and always give me your feedback down in the comments. If I missed something in the game, maybe we can include in that further testing, because I do want to revisit this games list with the likes of the 1060 versus the RX 480. I think that's going to be another great matchup that I want to do. I've been doing individual testing on all of the games that have come out this year with the 1060 and the RX 480 since they've come out. So I think it'll be good to go back and kind of test them now that drivers have matured with these titles, because right when the games first come out, they may have optimization issues just from the game developer or maybe from the driver side. So now that it's been a few months and some of these titles have gotten better optimization, I'm really looking forward to kind of revisiting that with the 1060 and RX 480. But these numbers are really good to see here, though. Certainly for the R9 390, it would seem that it held up a lot better than the GTX 970 in the long run, with the maturing of the drivers, and probably also having the 8 gigabytes of video memory helped it in some of these games as well. We know the 970s only got 4 gigabytes, and depending on who you ask, maybe even 3.5 gigabytes. Did you get your refund yet, by the way? I hope so. But I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys. I hope you all had a happy holiday and a happy new year coming up as well. We will be doing that 1060 versus 480 video before 2017 hits, so stay tuned for that, and I will catch you guys next time. Ta-ra. Yeah, we did that one take, by the way. Baller.